My name is Shaan Hurley. I'm going to be the moderator in the AEC Industry Software discussion panel. I am an independent consultant in the AEC and software industry, and we've assembled a great amount of experts in the AEC space from all different areas. And it's a 90-minute panel. Again, in the words of Smokey, we got a long ways to go and a short time to get there. So 90 minutes, I'll keep mindful of that as a timekeeper. It's not marketing, it's not sales. This is not we're trying to sell you something. We're talking about where we think things are, where we think they're going, and your thoughts on these. Every one of these different perspectives are really important to listen to. And, maybe we'll find commonality in through that and have a good time. And I encourage you to seek out and see some of these presenters or the panelists we have here because they're amazing people in all their own right. They're amazing. I'm absolutely honored to have them on the panel. We got some great ones in here. So, the goal is to find out where we're going and your perspectives on how to get there. All righty. If you'd like to ask questions, you can ask them in the Q&A panel. And at the end, we'll take those questions. I don't know if we'll have time and bandwidth to be watching that and 8 people on a panel. So it's going to be a challenge. We got a large group here. Evan, what do you think to that? 8 people on a panel. Am I pushing it? Am I over aggressive?
I think some of the panelists could maybe automate this a little bit better than
You mean
we'll be
like
able to do.
AI? Like
This is going to be
one thing?
manual. It's a manual, so we're going to have to rely on our brains a little bit. Maybe too much here. Maybe Clifton can help us out with that.
Yeah. I mean, maybe I'm an AI. You just don't know that yet. All right. Let's get in some introductions here. I'm gonna go through everybody's little box, and if you just give a quick overview of who you are, what you do, who you work for, and just what kind of wires you. So Matt, you're up.
Hey everyone, great to be here today. My name is Matt Arsenault. I'm a product manager with Autodesk, specifically with the Revit team with a focus on interoperability and data. I'm here because I've been in the AEC industry for about 15 years before joining Autodesk for the last 2.5. I'm really excited about, talking about where we're seeing things going forward and kind of, all the experience that we can share, especially for me. I come with an extensive background of doing different data flows and different geometric modeling. So I'm really excited to kind of talk through all my experiences in the industry.
That's awesome. Thanks, Matt. Altaf, you're up, man.
Thanks, Sean. Really excited to be on the panel. I'm Altaf. I'm the founder of Snaptrude, and Snaptrude is a modern BIM tool on the cloud. The way we try to describe it, it combines the ease of sketching, which everybody loves in the early design workflows, and the power of BIM, which everybody has to get to production. Can both of those words meet together in a collaborative environment on the cloud? So we've been building it for a while, started way back in late 2017 with this insight that design tool stack would have to be rebuilt in a cloud-first environment. We have a team of over 80 folks now, raised some venture capital, a few rounds, and yeah, that's about us.
Thank you. Mr. Goldman.
Thank you, Mr. Hurley, and everyone else. Yeah, this is Mark Goldman. I'm the director of AEC Industry Solutions at Esri, where I've been for about 5 years, and about 25 years before that involved as CAD was becoming common and BIM was becoming common, and now GIS in the built world is pretty well becoming understood, and love meeting with other folks like those on the panel who I think about half, if not 3/4 of you, we've met in person and been on panels together. So it's wonderful to be here and share what I'm seeing and hearing around the globe, AEC firms, owner-operators, as interoperability and AI and all the great things we're going to talk about are becoming commonplace. So glad to be here.
Timothy.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me so much. Thanks for the invitation, Sean. Yeah, my background, I'm the founder of Sevenfold, which is an independent design technology consulting agency. I have a background in HDR doing architecture, and then was this dedicated specialist at Gensler for the last 3 years before launching the company full time. I'm starting with releasing a lot of courses and really passionate about educating, making all the complex things we do in technology simple, intuitive, and approachable. But obviously, research and development. I'm really passionate about how to move things forward. So anyway, just excited to be here. I'm really excited for the topics we're going to get into, so I'll keep it brief, but I've basically been an industry professional for the last 10 years and excited to help everyone go to that next level in the industry. So thank you.
I don't see Purvi yet, and like I said earlier, she's gracious enough to try and to connect to us from Bangladesh, and they had an internet bandwidth issue where a giant internet backbone was accidentally cut. Wink. I don't think that stuff just happens, but anyway, we'll go to Clifton. Oh, you're on mute, Clifton.
Having me, Shaan. Hi, Clifton Harness, co-founder and CEO at TestFit. We've been building TestFit for about the last 7 years. Our focus is building tools that people actually use, and we automate surface parking lot design, commodity apartments, warehouse design. We are building the future of AEC on top of the backs of the most common spaces out there. We've got about 400 firms that use us across the planet. We're in every US state. I don't know. It's been a wild ride. Happy to be here.
You're welcome. Aaron.
Hello, good afternoon, good evening, good morning. It looks like we're covering all time zones. So my name's Aaron Perry. I'm head of digital design at Alford Hall Monaghan Morris. We are a architectural practice of about 550 people, primarily based in London, but we also have offices in Madrid, Sydney, Oklahoma City, etc. I'm lucky to coordinate a department of digital design experts within my firm that are all about software used for design and delivery in architectural and complex projects. Outside of that, originally a founder of the UK Dynamo user group based in London, and even more recently working with UK large firms, the American Institute of Architects Large Firm Roundtable and the European counterparts to help coordinate the future design software specification.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us. Evan.
Well, thanks very much for having me. My name is Evan Troxel. I am an architect, and I have done a lot of things as a practicing architect, project-wise, but also have gone off and taught for more than a decade during that time. And I've also started a couple of podcasts. One of those has been running we're going on our 12th year now, and it's called ArchiSpeak. And the Troxel podcast, which a few of the people who are on this panel today have been on, which is fantastic to see you all again. And that is really about tracking the coevolution of technology and AEC and how those two things influence each other and create various feedback loops, but also the disconnections that happen in there as well. So that's really me in a nutshell. I've really focused on the media side of things solely for the last couple of years, and coming up through the ranks of digital practice and kind of, I guess, doing similar things to some of these people, working in firms to transitioning to working on the profession and trying to build consensus and get us all going in the same direction.
Well, I appreciate everybody on the panel, and it's going to be a lot of fun, I think. I've spoken to most of you privately and known several of you personally, and so I thought it would be a really good mix. So, all right, let's get it going. I think we'll just take them by topics. If anything comes up organic, we want to peel along a thread. Let's explore that. But the goal is to have the panel be able to talk about the topics and those attending to be able to see the differing views and the commonalities, like I said. And I think we're going to learn a lot. All of us on the panel as well as attendees. So I think the base level one to start out is, where do you see the AEC industry at what is the point what it is at now, and where do you see it going? It doesn't have to be a level 400, level 500, granularity, but in 5 years, like, where are we going? And we can start peeling parts of that later on in discussions. But I think that kind of sets a base. Where are we at? Is this a top of the wave? I'm gonna start it off with Evan. I think you can probably frame it much better than I have.
Yeah, so the idea of where we're going, I think the thing that I would love to see is way more adoption. And I think everybody on this panel wants to see way more adoption as well. That's kind of been the gap that everybody here has talked about a lot, right? There are a lot of shiny objects going on in tech and AEC right now. There's a lot of proven things that still haven't been adopted. And so to me, like, that's really the biggest gap of issues that I think we've all kind of figuring out ways to address. And I would love to kick it off to the people who are actually working in practice to talk about that side of things. So I know, Aaron, you're at AHMM. You're also in charge of the digital department there, and there's aspects of training, there's aspects of standards, there's all these things that are all moving together kind of in the same direction. Can you tell us from the actual practice side? And so you're not pontificating from the outside looking in, you're really on the inside looking out at everything that's going on. And you're responsible for getting people who are in the firm doing the work, delivering the projects on board with things that are constantly changing. What's your experience with where things are going and where things maybe are right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think broadly speaking, we are very likely to see even more of a broad tool set over the next few years. And that might scare a few people who, you talk about adoption and how long it's taken to kind of move people from one tool to another, and how long that can sometimes take. But I definitely think we're in for even more fragmented tools in the future. And I think that's a really good thing. I think that's a great thing because we'll be able to use the best tools for the job. I think what we're probably likely to see in the next few years is moving away from model or file-centric workflows that have been quite common for the last 5 to 10 years. I think we're likely to see, through Matt's work at Autodesk on the AEC data model, we're likely to see much more granular, fragmented data exchange rather than kind of chucking giant files over the fence at each other. I think as a result of that, or because of that, I think we'll find that probably enables a lot more cloud-based compute in contrast to kind of desktop installed products and software. And I think because we'll have, I don't think as an industry we're very good at having structured data. I'm happy for anyone on the panel to say otherwise, but I think all of those things I just mentioned enable us to be able to more effectively use things like machine learning. And I think that's inevitable over the next few years as that data comes outside of those models and becomes something that's actually something to be trained on, and then as a result of which getting more productivity from that piece. But more tools, the onus then becomes on us to kind of make sure we're growing a team of people that expect new tools and can be agile and move quickly.
Thank you. And I'd like to just kind of wind back. We're at the beginning here, and Purvi, you just joined it. I know that I explained that you might not be able to get in because of the internet backbone issue, but if you could just introduce yourself, and then we can go right back into this. We're only in the, where the current state of the AC market is and where it's going. This also gives us another, a user of the software perspective in the panel. So.
Yeah,
Well,
thank you. Sorry, I'm on the opposite side of the world from all of you, and I swear I checked the time zone and just like making sure that he was correct. So my name is Purvi Irwin. I know most of you who are on the panel, and I'm sure I know a lot of the people who have joined in. So I am a design technology consultant. I am also a registered architect. I have degrees in architecture and historic preservation. I went from that to supporting the software side. And then for an Autodesk a value-added reseller in the US. And then when my husband joined the US Foreign Service, we moved to the other side of the world. And I've been doing support on my own, and I support clients around the world with their Revit needs, basically. So yeah, so I'm here as a user. I kind of was, on the other side for a bit with the reseller bit, but I'm very excited to be part of this discussion. I think, I've been working with technology a lot from my architecture practice and preservation practice, and then supporting architects. So I really feel like here my strength of being on this panel is talking a lot about the actual user experience and teaching and learning, and how we kind of help our users to find that space to learn the new technology to really help them succeed.
Thank you. And you look absolutely alert for such an early hour.
Yeah, I took a nap and then woke up again. I was like, I don't think I could power all the way through till 3 a.m. But
yeah, I was up at 4 a.m. and this is a true story. Before I welcomed in our opening session, I walked into the bathroom doorway. I didn't want to wake anybody up in the house, so I walked through the dark and right into the wall, which of course woke everybody up. So I don't do so well that early of an hour. Is anybody strong and want to jump on this,
I
or
want
should I
to
just
jump on
hand
what
it to
Aaron
Matt?
was saying, if I can.
Absolutely.
I completely agree. The move from file-based workflows and softwares that are so dependent on monolithic, giant, almost immovable files these days to a data-based approach where it's a very granular method. The information is organized and accessible is going to open the door for, like you said, AI and machine learning, certainly other, collaboration in ways that is just cumbersome, to say the least, if not impossible today. May not have an immediate effect on users. They may not recognize that they're using tools that are data-oriented versus file-oriented, but it's going to enable them to work in ways that just open the door for productivity, efficiency, point solutions to exist within a bigger structure without necessarily being part of a holistic, complex suite of solutions. I think of all the trends that are going on in the industry right now, this finally a move for our industry to be data-oriented versus DWGs and DGNs and PLTs and DXF and just all these files that cause issues in versioning and movement of information. I'm excited to see where the big vendors and independent consultants and influential firms are pushing this industry in the area of data.
Excellent. Let's hear, Matt. You've got a very firm position and a lot of customers. So let's hear.
Yeah, I completely agree. As Aaron mentioned, we've been working on like what we call the AEC data model, which is a way to structure data. But at the core of that, it's really about this granular data. We firmly believe, and I also just firmly believe from working in industry for a while, we have to get away from the file formats. We have to be working on bits of data in order to enhance that collaboration. And I think, all the things that Mark's saying are dead on, right? It's about, that productivity, the collaboration that you can have working on the right data at the right time. But, tying that back to what Evan was saying, it's also about adoption. When we can start to break away these constructs of, proprietary file formats, hard to use software, and give users less data to work with, it's going to open up the door for more participants to be inside of the technology ecosystem, to be part of the entire digital process of a project with an AEC. I think of, there were days I was still working in fabrication and be on job sites, and it was like the first time you'd see somebody in the field with an iPad in their hand versus a PDF printed set of drawings. And when we start to work at granular data, we can start to actually enable these folks to start to be participants in this process and be collaborators and not just on the end of it. I think that's really, really important and a heavy need for the industry. And I really see data being that foundational part to do it. And I don't see that kind of going away. We've been hearing it for a long time, and we're really excited to be working on it.
I love that trends predictions has merged with interoperability. And, I wholly agree. I was in the CAD software industry for over 25 years, and there was many discussions about let's get away from this file type, stuff, because it causes so many versioning and so many exchange problems. And I've talked to people and go, I've got 3 people in my firm that's all they do is translations and assuring data. And, if we could get away from that and where it's more homogeneous, it allows more innovation, more use of the data, and productivity, absolutely, with everything in here. And partners using the data downstream or at other points to the points of, Clifton, Alta, where are you in? You guys are cloud-based providers of AEC solutions. It's right up your alley. Unless you want to do a new file format to exchange.
Absolutely not. Just to agree with everyone over here, I think the underlying thing is moving to the cloud infrastructure. I think that's going to be the most transformative thing to happen in the next 5 years or so. And moving away from files to databases on the cloud where the data is structured and accessible based on the context of who the user is. If you're an architect, what kind of information do you need at this point of time? If you're using it on an iPad, what do you need at that point of time? How are your annotations syncing up? I think we'll see, because of the movement to cloud and away from files into a structured data system, the entire problem of data silos, which we all talk about, right from the early stage to construction, that we create data, we destroy it, we create data, we destroy it. I think we might start seeing those problems disappear because of this, and which is definitely a major problem for the industry. And that also enables tools, new tools, to get wider adoption because you're not creating another data silo, which is what every big firm is afraid of. They don't want another fragmented tool where work happens, which again needs to be recreated in some structured form in another tool. But what if everything is connected to a stream of data? And I think that might not make it disruptive of adapting, like adapting of new tools might not become a disruption, because I think if this happens, it's going to be a transition. It's going to be a lot easier to adapt new tools like this.
Excellent, excellent.
Can I throw something in there quick? I know we're about to move on.
Absolutely.
Well, and I know we're a bunch of technologists here on this call, but I'm really on the user adoption side as well. And so there's kind of like the jargon of speaking technology that we all take for granted, but I'm always like reading the person who I'm trying to teach. And the moment that their eyes roll to the back of their head, it's like I've lost them. So we always complain about adoption. Are we actually resonating with the people who are going to use the tools? And so I really come from a perspective of how do we create the right mental model so we're more agile so that when tools change in the future, because they will, how do we actually pivot with that because we have the right values, the right benefits, and the right outcomes we're all aiming at? So I'm really passionate about like optimizing the entire design life cycle rather than getting sort of in the engine room below the hood. I really care about like how are we driving towards a common destination and what does that look like? How do we take the right pit stops along the way? And we're speaking the same language. We talk about exchange of data. Well, language could be its own data set. How do we have the same operative language, right? That's not proprietary to a tool, but we can just say, yeah, a wall is a wall, and we're all putting buildings together. And how do we make smarter buildings? So I'm really keen on what is that playbook or what is that mental model that we can establish that's tool agnostic and is relatable from everybody from the new graduate all the way up to the principal who's managing client relationships. So we'll see if we got to dive deeper into that later.
Yeah, absolutely. Clifton, what's your perspective on where in your part of the AEC industry, where are we at and where are you going? Where do you see the industry going? And where would you like it to go?
Where would I like it to go? There's, I think, a lot of money, time, energy, communication, marketing spent on cloud, spent on collaborate, spent on break down silos and open up the data so that the machine learning can run on top of it sort of mentality. And like it's all kind of like fairies and pixie dust, because like the level of effort that you would actually have to go through to take, like, say, Perkins and Will, like take their entire data set of BIM and turn that into like machine learning usable, AI that can start to make CD level drawing. Like that's never going to happen right now, and it's not going to happen on top of Revit data. I think someone from Autodesk is here working on a better file format. That's great, but it doesn't solve the other core problem, which is like the data that we create is garbage, and the data that we ingest during construction isn't really like usable for the future, except in sort of metadata in an aggregate. So you can sort of tell at a high level, like, well, these are the kind of problems that we have in our BIM models. But because the data buildings are a long list of compromises. That's what they are. So if you want to build an AI that does really well, like you're going to have to build like a plumbing AI that desperately wants the plumbing to be as effective and successful as possible. And then you're going to need to do the same thing for mechanical systems. And you're going to do the same thing for all of the different systems that we have that compete for space in the buildings. And there's very little evidence of that kind of AI happening, because right now we have like statistical AI that's like, well, I think right here we need to register. So I think we have a data problem. I don't think we are anywhere near having enough data. Like, we're probably 30 years away from having enough data with today's machine learning models to make something that would come close to what TestFit can do. And TestFit is procedural modeling written by humans. Like we wrote the code because we know what's in the building code. We know what's product market fit for the real estate world. Like, this is sort of what you have to do to make this AI to generate, like, we're using structured data at TestFit to do all this stuff. Like, we're living the reality that everybody wants to be living. And I'm telling you, like, once you're there, all of the problems get way worse, because you start to realize that the buildings themselves are so complicated, and there's so many systems, and there's so many requirements, and it's overwhelming, right? So you need every discipline to have the same level of AI intelligence so that you can get a good building. Little evidence of that happening. You're going to need 30 more startups the size of TestFit to go after it. I'm very excited about all of the competition that's starting to happen. Like, the weird part of the future is that, like, you won't be a Revit firm, and you won't be an AutoCAD firm, or you won't be whatever your tech stack is. Like, you're going to be a firm that uses the best tool. I think Aaron, or someone said Matt, someone said you use the best tool for the job. And if TestFit can draw 30 years worth of parking in 3 minutes, like, architects aren't going to be drawing parking anymore. Like, it's not part of the job. Yeah, there's a rant for you. I'll calm down and maybe join again in a little bit.
You're all good, Clifton. I think I saw some head shaking. Yeah. Hervey, were you in agreement on some of those points on breaking it down and commonality of structured data? And we're not to utopia yet.
I mean, definitely. Like, I think that the point that I actually really agree with it was what Clifton said at the very end, where, if the computer, if you can figure out how to do the parking, we don't have to do it. So one of the things I always tell my client, right, is like, our job as the technologists are to find ways to make your job easier and to automate all that stuff that's really boring and annoying and that you don't like to do, so that you can focus on the fun part, which is actually the design of the building. So I think in the end, that's really where we're trying to get with all this technology, is to allow the designers to be designers and to not have to think so much about all of the things that everybody just has to do anyway, but then to make better design and better architecture by letting AI take care of, the code and the parking and, configuring some of the things that we need to have for life safety and those sorts of things for us, so we can focus on those other things. But then it also comes back down to the capacity of our users to be able to have the time to configure all of that, right? So, because all of my clients are small firms, they're, interior firms that really don't have a lot of bandwidth, or they just to learn all of these things. And so trying to make it as easy as possible for them. I mean, I in the basic level am just trying to automate Revit, like the software itself, so that the schedules create by themselves. It seems super simple, but there are a lot of firms that still are doing things manually. and so I love this discussion, because exactly the part that Clifton's doing is really great, and I think it helps those smaller firms to then get there faster, because they don't have to think about it as much, they don't have to worry about it as much. So
I think the initial question was about adoption, and like, startups don't sell software to people that won't buy it again, and that will solve half of our problems. All right.
Yeah, I want to push back some of the things you said, Clifton. The idea that 30 years from now, you have dogs barking in the background. That's wonderful.
It's all good, Mark. I've got a dog fight going on downstairs.
30 years ago, I don't think we would have had any ability to project where we are now. If you were on a computer, you were using DOS, and you were using command lines. DXF files were as good as it got. There was no agreement anywhere, even on, what the basic definition of a line was, much less a wall. Blocks were just becoming standard in CAD applications. I was recently asked, actually, what do I see? Make some projections, Mark, for the year 2050, which I think is absurd to try to do that. Because 5 years from now, I can't imagine where we'll be with the amount of data we have, the speed in which things like AI, reality capture are progressing. I think that we're going to have much greater structured data, vast amounts of it at our fingertips that are either open within firms or even open across the industry. They're going to feed generative AI and enable things that we really honestly could, very few of us on this call, and maybe even in general, could imagine where we'll be. I think that where we are now, even compared to 5 years ago, is so significant. Things aren't slowing down. If anything, they're accelerating the pace of change, pace of adoption, and interest in tech within this industry. My soapbox.
No, I think it's all good. Tim, do you have anything to add in there? I mean, there's a lot of thought-provoking stuff.
You calling me out there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've been shaking my head. I have a pile of notes sitting here based on your prompts before the panel, and I just think anything that can reduce friction to adoption. I realize that. I mean, I don't want to keep sounding like the same thing, but I realize just people's willingness to learn, like it's like we are still working on infrastructure in our physical brains as humans. That's hundreds of thousands, millions of years old, and yet we're trying to inject so much information. And so it's like some people, how do you go to sleep at night trying to reconcile what to decide, how to do it, test it out, and then create that instant feedback loop? And so I know there's a lot more to dive into, but I'm really keen on what is keeping us from real-time feedback, which kind of teases out to the simulation software, what's the right data, how do I use an AI, how do I get to a real-time level? And if we can't get to real-time, how fast can we make that so it's as nimble in the design process as everything we're doing, right? So it's right there just as fast as a felt tip pen sketching. And so that's really what I'm keen on, is the data-driven design approach, which then sets up the value of, okay, we can rely on the data that we're putting in because we're using it as part of the design process. It doesn't feel like an extra. It just is, it's useful data. And so I know we keep using that word data, but it's like if it's not visible, if it's just buried deep in the BIM model and we can't get the right eyes on it, and it's not easy to add back into the model, all those friction points, right, need to be smoothed out. And so, yeah, that's why I've started with trying to raise up highly skilled BIM modelers, but then all the automation picks up where that leaves off. So there's a lot to tackle.
I mean,
Can I jump
So I'm
in
not
on
sure
the
where
back
you
of
end up.
the real-time piece? So I
go
think
for it.
real-time analysis is a really interesting one. I guess we're definitely into the kind of field about interoperability and integration now, but the real-time analysis at the moment is really tricky. You talk about, how soon can we close that loop? Because at the moment we take models and we export them into another product that has a completely different ecosystem and platform. We run some analysis, and by the time we put it back into the primary design product, it's too late. That window we had to maybe implement the design ideas or the analysts that we've kind of come back with, that window's gone. It's probably too late to be able to kind of get back to that piece. And so I think moving, and again, kind of linking back to a lot of people's thoughts about probably a more web-enabled, fragmented set of information rather than these kind of giant file types, is probably more likely to increase the ability to use the best tool for the job to run some analysis whilst designing. I think we've seen that a lot in the last 2 or 3 years, where real-time visualization has helped. No longer do we have to kind of send it out to a visualization studio or wait and do a render for 4 days. We're actually kind of being able to design whilst seeing it almost in real time now with a lot of the visualization engines. And I think what we're likely to probably see in the next couple of years is the ability to now be able to run analysis, whether that be structural analysis, whether that be engineering analysis, whether that be building performance analysis, which helps us from an environmental point of view. I think that's probable. One thing I will say about interoperability, which I'm kind of maybe keen to hear other people's thoughts on, I think almost all of us have only talked about data at this point. I think geometry is a really important thing to consider as well. So yes, being able to perhaps put a parameter into a door and have that show up in a door schedule without opening a full Revit model is really important. But I think there's some trends that we're seeing now Within maybe, say, the Autodesk ecosystem, you've got things like the One Graphics engine, where we might see in the next few years aspects of a universal scene description. So the Hydra One Graphics engine coming into Revit, possibly. We'll see what happens. Other Autodesk products picking that kind of stuff up as well. A lot of the vendors joining the USD Open Alliance, so that we probably will see more software vendors leaning into that USD piece. I don't know whether that wholeheartedly means that all these existing software platforms that we've been using will abandon their graphics system and move across. There's a huge amount of engineering that goes into that. But I'm keen to hear maybe some thoughts on this panel as well, where we think it's not just about data, we've got to be thinking about geometry as well.
Aaron, as usual, your thoughts on a subject always scratch and get people thinking about things. So it caused a lot of chatter. Geometry is mathematical data. Real-time rendering saved me a lot of time. Talking about data is kind of boring at times, but Jason says, where's our professional training about data management schema, taxonomy as design professionals? A lot of good stuff here. I mean, now we're starting to fall apart.
Probably the biggest problem, I think, from Aaron's perspective, is that geometry is treated very differently in all of the products that he uses than the data is. Like, there isn't a nodes and edges way in which you can read a Revit model. So you have to unpack it. Like, that's why the geometry needs to be better, I think, needs to be structured. And you're not going to have structured data from a model that's cobbled together by 15 people. Like, it's gonna take a while.
Yeah.
I have certain thoughts. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, I think that's actually a really good point. I was writing some things to say about that. Is that the fundamental issue that I found is actually the willingness to share data between companies, right? So most of the firms that I've assisted in the past, I don't know, 10 years that I've been a BIM consultant, they don't really want to share what they're doing with other firms. It's very much like, I made this and this is mine, and it's not something that, this is my proprietary information, right? There's only one company I've ever worked with where I've talked to like the, sort of their director who is in charge of, handling my stuff. And he was like, yeah, it's fine. If you made this training video and you want to share it with other firms, that's totally cool. Because to me, if we've standardized stuff, if we get new employees and they learned it that way, then you've already done some of our work for us, right? We can do it standardized across the industry. So I think that's another important point, is that if we can find ways to create more standards so that people are doing things, in a logical, connected way between different companies, then it makes it easier to use the AI and machine learning to share that data across different companies and to use it in real time, because it's already kind of standard and mapped, across these different places. So kind of teaching things in a way that connect between different companies and sort of showing companies that sharing is better for all of us. Like when I'm helping one client with something, I often will actually pull up, a template that I'm working on for someone else and say, this is how I've done it here. This is how I've done it here. Like, do either of these seem like things that work for you? And, before, when I was working with like 6 clients at once, at a certain point, a lot of the stuff would end up being very similar, because they would all kind of realize that there were 1 or 2 ways that kind of seemed the most logical.
Alta, you had a comment along that line?
So I think a lot of the points which we are discussing are fairly interconnected, and interoperability is, specifically with respect to geometry, is one of the teething problems that we're all suffering from. But the core issue is, as we have been creating silos with these file types, as these systems start moving into a cloud-based environment, and when we talk about data should include and must include geometry, because that's how data is represented in the AEC world most of the times. I think we will start addressing some of these core issues, and interoperability is something which has been a top of mind for us at Snaptool since the beginning. And the way we perceive it, as Aaron was mentioning, the entire ability to do real-time analysis is because you have to prepare data specifically geometry data, in certain form to do analysis. And your conceptual data is in a certain other form. Your BIM data is in certain other form. The entire data exchange, if it happens in a siloed ecosystem, makes it broken. The moment you go into a system where it's all in a single data schema and you're pulling information the way you would need it, you can use whatever fragmented tools, but which again talk back and forth to the single data structure. You can actually enjoy whatever tool you like at any part of the workflow, but still not lose the single source of truth, so to say. And I think we will see this happen in the next few years. And I think that's going to be the most transformative change which this industry will see. Whether we use AI, ML post that is we will see. But at least this is going to solve some of the most immediate pressing problems the industry is suffering from.
I'm going to raise a lightning rod if I can. Curious of the developers and practitioners on this panel, who is involved with or has participated with Building Smart and OpenBIM and IFC and the push toward standards? Yeah, not surprised, Aaron and probably Matt as well, I'm guessing. Because a lot of the things that we're wishing for or talking about it as a future are enabled today. Maybe, there certainly are plenty of black eyes that Building Smart and IFC have had over the years, but being pretty active with them for the last few years, I see a real future and even current solutions to a lot of our problems with what is going on there. And it's really, I was involved in the very first meeting of what was called the International Alliance for Interoperability 1,000 years ago, and keeping up with it pretty active these days. Geometry and attributes and common standards and getting away from application to application to application exchanges, but a common language that the industry agrees on. And it's one of your topics, integration and interoperability. I'm just curious what the panel here has to say or to contribute or willingness to jump in if they haven't been involved with the effort.
I mean, I could maybe kick us off from
I want to jump in again, but
Building Smart point of view. Sorry, I'm talking on top of each other. I was just going to suggest, Mark, from July last year when I presented the future AEC software specification, which was an amalgamation from a lot of efforts from constructors and architects and structuralists and so on, we presented this idea of the data framework and this idea of in the cloud, transactional, kind of almost like a kind of a Git style exchange of information between different parties. And, that's fundamentally what a number of different vendors are kind of looking at doing and delivering right now. And one piece that kind of, I remember one of the venture capitalists afterwards asking me, well, who's going to build this? And I could think of nothing worse than creating a brand new set of standards all over again. It's just kind of the wrong approach. And so we had a conversation with Building Smart. We spoke to their technical director. I think it would be fair to recognize that IFC is not perfect, but broadly speaking, it is probably one of the more advanced dictionaries of construction terminology and libraries of information that we probably have, which is universally kind of accepted across multiple vendors. There's a lot of startups that are kind of fundamentally building on the backbone of IFC right now, but it is still a file format that exists. And so I am aware of what they're trying to achieve with IFC 5 and making that web enabled. I understand that Autodesk, I think at the moment, are the #1 contributor to IFC 5 in terms of supporting that endeavor and kind of pushing that forward, which Matt can probably talk about in a second. But I do fundamentally believe that if we're all heading in the right direction, then that's a positive thing. So if we're all looking at IFC 5 as this kind of future, if we're all looking at maybe USD Open Alliance for the kind of the 3D aspects, I think that's a positive thing. I really would hastily say we should not be writing another standard here. That's not a good use of anyone's time.
Yeah, I would agree with that, to add on to Aaron and some of the other points too, right? I think, IFC is a good representation. It does a lot of things right. And as Aaron kind of alluded to, there's some things that are kind of missing there, and that's okay. Like we can recognize those things. And I think there's some real promise in what we're talking with IFC 5. I think there's overlap in the conversations with the development of IFC 5 that has a relationship to what's going on with OpenUSD. And we really shouldn't be defining a new standard at all, right? And I think the other part of it too is when it comes to interoperability and to bring it back to the user, I think one of the really complex parts of the geometry world is all of our tools that we use throughout the design process have completely different geometric engines for how they actually model things. I mean, we go from Rhino modeling with NURBS and meshes, and you go from SketchUp that only models in, nodes and points and full mesh. You've got web-based tools that are doing GeoJSON. You've got some, Blender BIM starting to model natively with IFC schemas. You've got other products that are doing a hybrid of solid modeling and mesh, and it's really, really hard, and it creates that data loss when you're converting between different types of geometry. But it also, what's really interesting is like our users aren't really aware that they're modeling in these different things. Like a cube is a cube is a cube, but it's not from a mathematical standpoint in terms of modeling. And I think breaking this down and starting to let tools enable and have multiple ways to model geometry and have these different representations of the same things that enable users to have consistent behaviors on top of them will make it easier with the geometry aspect of interoperability. And also, when we do start to really adopt full on of certain standards, that we can have better lossless translation between different products that have these different geometric engines underneath. I think that's a really big part of it.
Evan, you haven't piped in on this, but I've seen some of your reactions.
I don't have anything intelligent to say about this part of it. I understand the pain that exists here, and that's really what I think I'm agreeing with more than anything. And even to go back to what Purvi was talking about earlier with the idea of sharing is caring, and I think somebody even put that into the chat. I still see issues here with so many people sharing so much conflicting information and different ways to do things, and talking about like industry standards with so many markets and different ways to approach those and so many phases. And there's so much nuance. To go back to Clifton's comment early on in this conversation about how complex these buildings are, the process is even more complex because it's different with every individual. It's different with every team. It's different with every firm. And I just kind of shudder at the fact of that, because it is going back to my first comment about adoption is so difficult in this. And all the stuff that we're talking about here, like normal mortals don't care about any of this stuff because all they want to do is a good job. And these tools are making it so hard to do a good job. People don't like using the majority of tools. I think there's tools made by people on this panel that are breaking that barrier, right? We've seen tools that have done this successfully. SketchUp is an example. Enscape's an example. And that to me is a huge part of the battle, is just making tools that people want to use. And we're noticing this in many other ways as well. Like I've got kids, I've got teenagers who are constantly, and I'm guilty of this myself, we're constantly looking for like that next dopamine hit, right? That is in the software that we're using to do our job. And if it doesn't deliver that, we don't like it. We're looking for something to distract us from doing that. I know that like I'm kind of going all over the place here, but these are the psychological and realities of the practice of architecture. And when you're talking about databases and schema and data flowing like water and all these things, like people just want the stuff to work, and they don't want to hear all of this part of it. I think the people who are showing up to watch this panel do care. They care a lot about this stuff. But again, going back to like the mere mortal side of this conversation, the people who just have to deliver the projects and get the work done are looking at this from an entirely different angle. So how do we do these things and talk about it to the people who care, but then sell it really adoption-wise to the people who do the work? That's a completely different conversation, vocabulary, communication. And I keep thinking about those people because my job has always been to kind of bridge the gap between the technologists and the doers who are actually delivering the projects. And there is still an enormous gap there. And I think people are creating tools that are starting to address that, and some have successfully, but it's, for the majority of it, it's not that at all. And so these are all the thoughts that are swimming around in my head, Shaan, as I'm nodding my head and shaking my head in different directions as I'm hearing people talk. But there's a lot going on here that is still unsaid, right? And it's hard to address all that in this webinar.
You fired a whole bunch off in myself. In my former, on a product team, large software product team, I came as a user of the software into the software industry, which was quite a shocking transition that I'm sure several of you have gone through, as well as some of the people that are attending here. One thing I realized is my goal was never to be the best user of the software. I really just wanted to design better bridges and structural members and things like that. And when I got into the software world, constantly heard people like, well, I put this tool up here on this palette so it would make them do this. And if we show them how to use this, they'll be able to do that better. And I'll be like, honestly, it's pretty amazing that people are using our tools to build buildings that are so complex, but they've also got to learn the software and where that tool is there and what the capability or the limitation was. So it was always this, like if we want to get to utopian here, it's not data, it's not geometry, it's just let me do things and maybe get rid of this mouse, you're throwing everything through that. But that's my little diatribe. I always was trying to keep that empathy of understanding that the goal of the user of a software wasn't to get better at using their software. It was to get their job done.
Yep.
So, anybody got any things
Can I jump in on this? Can I jump in?
Go for it, Tim.
Absolutely.
Go for it, Tim.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, audio was dipped in and out. One thing to add, I was resonating with everything you're saying there, Evan, and data silos, moving upstream. I think a lot of this is how do we reduce the perceived, like the firm has invested a lot of man and women power into developing the project as a model. I mean, if you think about just purely the labor cost to build that model over the life of the project and all of its phases, that could be many millions of dollars worth of just design time potentially. And so the idea of kicking that over the fence to the industry doesn't really appeal because they've spent so much money just building it for the client and then hoping they're profitable at the end. So how do you incentivize? And then when they do share, oh, the project's dead or it's 10 years old and it's in like Revit 2005 or whatever, it's like really old software. It's not current standards that we've kept to. So to your point, Aaron, if we had like a Git to say we could parse out bits of the project that are no longer going to be carried forward, so we're not breaking NDAs, we're not disclosing confidentiality problems with our clients, but there's a design solution that we feel is a good palette of solutions we've thought through that might be of interest to others in our industry. How do we just cherry pick that out and say, I want to feed this bit into the pool for the whole industry to potentially learn from and take it forward from? And so I think the idea of just kicking a whole model over the fence, people are going to be concerned about copyright infringement. So my thought was like, how do you have a Git-based sharing solution or a blockchain type solution where you can actually have authorship baked into the sharing process? So if you did want to trace back to the originator, you could, and we can, but I can see the hesitations of why people don't want to share.
So I want to go back to what
That
I
was
said
just my
earlier, if I can, because Tim, what you said there is spot on. These things that people want and need, and there's brilliant ideas amongst the few hundred people who are listening in and the few hundred more who will listen over the months, need to be chiming in, raising their voice, attending meetings, and let their voice be heard beyond just their CAD manager or BIM manager to move the ball forward. And I think that's what a lot of us are doing here. I'm kind of preaching to the choir. If you dial into one of these kind of webinars, you're probably already somewhat active in the industry. I also want to maybe pat a lot of us here, ourselves on the back for, there was a time where no softwares worked together outside of the most cumbersome file exchange formats. And now just this week, what Autodesk and Nemetschek announced, interoperability agreements, Esri and Autodesk, and Esri and Trimble, and Esri and some of the Nemetschek products as well. I mean, we have recognized as vendors that we cannot be the sole source of solutions for an industry as complex as the built world.
Or Mark, the vendors have realized that the customer success spend is outrageous because you'll have to spend so much saying, oh, we're better, we're not worse, or the interoperability lowers the software vendors spend because they're spending less time supporting people.
Yes.
Like let's not say, oh, thank you, Autodesk, for being so helpful here. Like everybody's gonna make more money in the software space when stuff can talk to each other. Like all the manufacturing people have proven that.
They could
I
also
think
stay on their same horse, which is we're only going to work within our environment, and we're not going to have a team of a dozen or more people working on, common format interoperability. We're going to, we're just going to keep one person on that little project. We're just going to continue to work on our own best way of drawing walls, doors, windows, bridges, and roads. But instead, the vendors are investing in interoperability. Yeah, because there's no way they'll ever be able to compete with everything. So they'll make theirs best, and hopefully it works with someone else's, and the whole, tide lifts all the ships. But it is a different world than 5 years ago, certainly 10 years ago, where there was very little coepetition amongst vendors. And now it's somewhat commonplace to, at least behind the scenes, if not, raising the flag of, look at this great case study where all these competing products work together. We're doing a lot behind the scenes to make things work, even when we don't talk about it.
And it's people like you, Mark, and Matt, and then other AEC industry people. So I appreciate that. I know that, Matt, your point doesn't go lost on me that you're getting all different types of geometry in there, and the user of your software has no idea that that's coming in there. You're kind of getting that stray dog with the fleas kind of thing coming in your door. Poses a lot of challenges for you dealing with that data and geometry. So, I'm not penalizing you for all that. Yeah, I just want to say, I think to Mark's point, I think all the vendors are doing much better about this and working together and trying to streamline the interoperability. I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges I keep hearing about. When I talk in a software company and outside of a software company, it's always those challenges of exchange of data integrity, and that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah,
anybody
and
else?
I completely agree with that too. And I think it's like that is the challenge that we face. It like from a Revit side, it's like it is just become a catch-all for a lot of things. But the problem, that's it. Like we don't, from like our perspective, we don't want to stop users from using the right tool to do what they're trying to do. It's if you're coming to a place like Revit to be the place where you're going to document, then we have to make sure that you can document any piece of geometry, no matter where it came from, and be able to use it for that workflow. Because at the end of the day, you're trying to deliver the contractual documents for that building to get built. And that's really, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do. And even with interoperability, like that's what matters at the heart of it. And I think, it is really great to see, all of these, the partnerships like Mark mentioned with Esri and, the one he mentioned with Nemechek Group, because it is an awareness of doing it. But at the same time, it's like, we just really want to be able to let people use the tool they want to use to get the job done that they're trying to do. And that's at the heart of it, regardless outside of the kind of vendor side of it that you might see from the business perspective. And at the end of the day, we really just want to let people do what they're trying to do because we care about the industry, and we care about the built environment just as much as everyone else is trying to use the tools.
All right. And Clifton, back to an old point of yours, if we have real-time data and stuff like that, somebody has made a comment about they'd like to see the real-time cost so they could go through iterations as well. So
it's really weird. Like there was this time in like 2016 when people were like, we're going to use the cloud to generate everything. And it was like, we don't want any of the users to ever touch the thing that was generated. And so cloud was going to save us because we were going to generate 10 billion options in the cloud. And that totally panned out to not really be what the feedback loop that the design community wanted, like at all. Like they want the real-time feedback. So cloud, I don't think as a generative thing really panned out for AEC yet. It might come back, but it'll be a while. It's the trust in the AI is the problem. Like you can generate a ton of stuff with this AI, but if you can't manipulate the AI, the users were never going to trust it. So I'd say interoperability is a problem, but the trust in the software is really at the core of the issue. In my view, like, do I really trust SketchUp with an intern versus myself with TestFit? And you give an hour each, what do you trust more? Like, how do you extract risk out of your software stack is sort of what I'm saying. And interoperability, yes, it's great, when you're doing SDs, DDs, CDs, stuff down the pipe, where you really have to collaborate on, like, hey, we want to make sure this building stands up. But like the kind of collaboration that we're seeing in feasibility is like, hey, can we hard cost this thing instantly and figure out how much it would cost? So it's a very different. It's different than what I thought it would have been like 6 years ago. Figured I'll let y'all know, like generating in real time, it has a lot of trust. Like TestFit's doing well with that, and people buy it. Like it's a good tool.
All right. So I think we've gotten, and if somebody wants to pick apart in the predictions, the interoperability, or AI, throw your hand up. Otherwise, we can move on to some more things and pull those apart. And we can wrap back around. For the attendees, you can ask a question in the Q&A module, so that when we get to the end, we'll leave some time in the end to, we've got a great panel here with different perspectives, and it's a great opportunity to ask the question of a panel like this. So, how about sustainability? Let's, the importance of sustainability in the AC industry. Where are we going with that? Is it something that, is beneficial to everybody, or is it something that's just kind of is it a marketing thing? I mean, I'd hate to hear that that's the case.
I've been poking around on that. It seems like in many things, the US is a bit behind what's happening in Europe around the importance of big topics like sustainability, where I think that we're just less willing to be told what to do. And various governments across Europe and the EU in general creating mandates around sustainability and circular economies and reducing the carbon impact of the built world and reducing the landfill that gets generated by our buildings. So I think it is a little bit of greenwash. It's more greenwashing here in the US, it seems, than it is overseas. And I think it's a shame. But yeah, we're a slower moving ship in some ways. And like I said, I think that we tend to be reluctant to be told what to do until we believe it ourselves. And it seems that certain countries, at least across Europe, accept when the government says this is the right way to do it. So I'm seeing, a lot of movement in Nordic countries, as well as some of the sort of Central European countries adopting digital methods of describing the products and the parts and pieces of construction, so that you know what you're building, what impact it had to get built, and what impact it's going to have over the years. And I would love to see that movement come over to the US. But yeah, it seems like events like Greenbuild and the Elements of AIA conference that have a sustainability topic, I don't really see the ball moving much. It seems to be just a lot of talk.
I mean, I can obviously comment from a European perspective to Mark's point there, to follow on. Imagine London. Imagine a city of buildings that are 200, 300, 400, 500 plus years old. It is inevitable that some of those buildings are no longer fit for purpose. They overheat. They're just not great spaces to be in for a modern working environment or living environment. Those buildings need maintenance. They need repairs. They need reconfiguration. And the idea of pulling down a building and starting with a completely blank site is just not responsible. It's just fundamentally not responsible. And whether that's a case of being told that you can't do that, or whether you actually just acknowledge that that's probably not a good thing to be doing in the first place. So from my perspective, talking about some of the projects that we're working on here in London, yep, absolutely right. You are not permitted to take a building down and start from scratch. You've got to demonstrate just cause and the data as to why, if at any point you're doing that. So every single project we work on, it's at one end of the scale. Can we paint it and get away with the most light touch thing to kind of make it a more modern, accessible, appropriate building? Make some minimal changes, make some fundamental fabric building changes, gut it right back down to a structural core of the building, or just leave the facade and reconfigure the interiors. You've got to put a metric-based proposal forward as to how to do that. And I think one of the biggest challenges we've got in the AEC software space is almost no software on the market understands an existing building. Absolutely every single piece of software on the market at the moment, you start from a big blank white screen. That's it. And so I think fundamentally there's a significant issue outside of the US for a lot of countries just unable to acknowledge that most projects for us start with an existing building. And the question is, how much can we save? And how can we use data and tools to analyze the embodied carbon impact of how much building fabric can be retained versus how much is demolished? Have a study of 7 or 8 different options where we take more of the building away or keep as much of the building as possible. What is then not just the embodied carbon impact of that, but also the operational carbon? So, okay, we've taken away a bit more of the existing building, but actually this now performs much more effectively in terms of solar gain and so on and so forth. And I think that's a real weakness in the AEC software space at the moment, is that a lot of our products are just designed for this kind of new build, new project, new building somewhere on a blank site. And I think it's a real challenge outside of the US. I can talk obviously specifically about European delivery here. It's really, really tricky. And I think that's a serious space in which the software vendors need to step up.
Yeah, Purvi, you did historical building preservation. I'm sure you're all over the spectrum on that one. Preservation of some versus maybe not so much on this, or understanding the case wholly.
No, I mean, this definitely hit it home for me because when I practiced architecture, every single project I worked on was on an existing building. And it is a huge problem. I mean, maybe, I guess, 12 years ago, it was my job to calculate the existing building lead credit on a project using Revit. And I can't even tell you how long that took and how big of a pain it was to try to figure out how to do that this was, 2012 Revit. So, it was not nearly as advanced as it is now, but it's a huge issue. I agree with you 100%, Aaron. Like, as a preservationist, the sustainability piece is a huge piece of that for me too. And I know our buildings are not as old in the US as they are in Europe, but there's still a lot of preservation happening, especially I was based in DC before. And so that's, there are a lot of older buildings there, and that's what my old firm specialized in. And we both sustainability and historic preservation. I had the honor of actually working with Carl Elefante, who coined the lovely phrase that the greenest building is one that's already built, right? So I think that that's a huge point, and that our technology does need to get better at analyzing that information, because that was a huge pain point for me, and I think still is for my old firm, in terms of how to provide that data that our building is being sustainable and is meeting these larger environmental goals that different architecture and AEC industries out there are putting out there, that we need to do, because we know that the AEC industry is the largest creator of carbon in the world, and we need to find a way to reduce that for sure. But one other piece of it that I actually is interesting to me is, so my sister is a building science engineer, and she's told me that it's very difficult to take the information that architects create in Revit models or whatever software they're using and put it into the software that they use to do their analyses. And so I think that's another piece of it that really needs a lot of work too, is how to make that information go. She tells me that they get models, and they basically just try to scrub out as much of it as they can, because the more complex our models are that we give them, the harder it actually is for them to do their job. And a part of that too, I think, is the integrity of the modeling and making sure that the envelopes are actually closed when you're modeling. And that's a whole other issue of, that goes back to the garbage in, garbage out thing, but finding a way to, I think, that piece of it, right? That interoperability between the software that our environmental science engineers are using and what we're doing, and how we can better integrate those, is another important point on top of the preservation piece, which is near and dear to my heart.
Really great insight.
Now, I don't want to pat myself too hard on the back, or Esri, but that is one of the big differentiators between GIS and the CAD and BIM tools. And I barely know how to spell GIS 5 years ago before joining Esri. I had one project 20 years ago, had the intersection of CAD and maps, and not a whole lot had changed over 15 years. But and I had one presentation, it was very short-lived, where I would show the screenshots of the main CAD applications exactly as you described, Aaron, blank screens. And what GIS does differently, whether it's Esri or open source or something from our competitors, is it provides context, and it provides information that could be from the National Oceanic Atmospheric Agency for historical weather patterns and wind trends, or it could be, location of other buildings and the shading and shadowing that they create. And I've seen this brilliant project that's just coming out of sort of science fair level research, where the existing buildings are projected from satellite imagery. They are 3D modeled, the basic materials are understood, and then an analysis of their embedded carbon and embodied carbon and their generated carbon is analyzed of whether it does make sense to tear down the building. Could you ever retrofit the existing building to meet the levels of new buildings, and what would the cost be? So there's some amazing things that when we start to think beyond just our 3D modeling tools for drawing and model generation and design purposes, and start looking at building energy modeling and GIS with all of its context, does open the door to some really great things around sustainability. And I think that they are at most sort of on the sidelines, or tangential to the work that most of us do, and probably most of what people are listening here do.
Since I'm the hardcore capitalist, I think I need to make an observation about sustainability. It is not AEC's fault that the built environment doesn't care about sustainability. AEC doesn't own the built environment. Real estate investors, real estate developers, and real estate owners are the people that control the built environment. They're the people that hire architects, that pay us to do what we do. Because it is not a priority for them, it is unlikely to get the money that AEC needs, frankly, to make it a priority. And I'm speaking mostly from my experience in the US, where about half of our built environment is privately funded. That's half the market that's likely not going to care about sustainability. I worked with CoveTool to put EUI, energy use intensity, in a test fit, and I tried to get several developers, our customers, to talk to me about it, and to try to explain, like, this is similar to your efficiency metric. This is how much energy this partie, this shape of the building, is going to have relative to these other parties. And it fell on deaf ears because they care more about making sure the building will be profitable. So it's not AEC's fault, real estate owners and developers.
Yeah, we
Just
design, build,
I gotta jump in
buildings
on
for
this.
business to occur. We don't build buildings just for the sake of buildings. They are so that manufacturing, rentals, restaurants, grocery stores can sell their products. Yeah.
I'll just to add to the
Well-
earlier points. Am I audible?
Yep, you are.
So we definitely are hearing a lot of a recent trend in preservation of existing buildings, tenant improvements, and I think the word is taking some shape in prioritizing those kind of projects, especially with the economic downturn on commercial real estate. So tenant improvement has been on the rise, and we will see that sustainability as a metric might get incorporated and measured. And this is where the impact of some of the new real-time capabilities, and that's where I feel like machine learning has a lot of role to play in bringing real-time access to this data, geometry cleanup, to be able to make the model ready for analysis. And if we can bring these metrics real-time, where people don't have to put in extra effort to measure these metrics, which are obviously very, very clear, can we start considering these as part of the design process and take decisions, more informed decisions, just like how we take informed decisions with respect to cost, with respect to some of the other metrics. And I think we are on the track, just has to happen sooner.
Tim, you had something to add there? You've got some experience in this.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I was at Gensler for 3 years, and then half my time for the last 2 years was driving an initiative for sustainability adoption. They called it resilience. So shout out to the whole team there. There was dedicated specialists in-house, and I was on the technology team trying to, how much can we do before we bring in the sustainability consultant to inform that kind of real-time simulation, data feedback, right? And I just want to give kudos to them, because from the C-suite all the way down, we saw consistently over the 3 years that there was always a priority to both, it's our legacy as well as an imperative to do this in all of our projects. Now, how do you actually drive that into the projects? That was the challenge I was thinking about on a daily basis. And it got complex because every practice area had different timelines, different constraints. So you'd always have to get comfortable with objection handling. Okay, I don't have time. Everyone says that every single time. So how do you make the time so that's worthwhile without eating into the budget? And then to your point, Clifton, how do you go upstream? And so there's multiple tech clients which have to remain nameless, but made it a priority as part of sort of an ESG statement. But then just because you're broadcasting that as a public thing, how do you bridge that into the design process? So, okay, you're doing your social part to make a statement, but how does it actually drive change? And so people would prioritize it, but then they look to the design teams to actually inform them on how to implement those changes. And so it boiled back to the same thing we've been talking about at the beginning is what is the useful information that actually helps us make adjustments? So it's, the daylight factors, the wind flow, and you go right down the list, heat gain, embodied carbon, and you have to have that common language. And so, when you have a really big tech stack that all is trying to do different things, like 14 different tools or 8 different tools, just that complexity is a whole world unto itself. And so it was like, how do you get somebody a quick win before you have to hire it out to a consultant, get it fully engineered to validate what you think is right? And then once it's done, have that life cycle analysis come back and prove that your assumptions up front actually performed as expected once the building's owned and occupied. So like that kind of connectivity, I also think because it's in the global conversation and more, I think it sets up interoperability conversations for all the things we were talking about. Like if we use the momentum of being more sustainable, better stewards of people and planet, we can also get the momentum to be heard as technologists when we're not trying to compete with the design process, but we're trying to facilitate making it possible. And now that that trust is built, now we can do even more things through technology. They say, hey, you solve this, what else can you do? So I saw it as a vehicle for building tremendous trust, but it doesn't make it any easier. So I agree with what everyone's been saying. So I was trying to figure out how do you get people quick wins without breaking the bank? And then that started to snowball, but we're a long way off.
We don't have any easy answers yet. I was hoping by this point in the discussion, everything could be solved and Evan would be like, aha. But yeah, we got a lot of things here.
I mean, I could give more tact.
We got a break after this, but we can flow a little bit into it. But what I would like to do is save some time. If anybody has any pressing questions for the panel, they can put it in the Q&A. There's been some great discussions in the chat. We do have a couple areas we haven't touched. I mean, we bridged across a few of them in just starting out at one topic and kind of flowing out organically into those. But lightning round, I think user experience, we've already talked about that. And I do want to say I ran a lot of the user feedback loops for Autodesk for years. I'm passionate about connecting product to the end users to make sure before you build something that it's the right thing and that the things that are important for the users are understood, and also the users understand more what's being made on the other side, the challenges with making software and so feedback loops, I think we understand that. I think everybody at the table and not here are listening more to that. But virtual reality, XR, the world of XR and what that can do with spatial, I know that goes back into structured data, because then it's all kind of a sprawling thing, and I'm realizing more of that as we go, and collaboration across disciplines. So if anybody wants to grab a topic for a few minutes, we could kind of pick into, and then we'll go to Q&A. Let's do it. So like a lightning round.
Sure. Can I talk about user interface experience for just a second? Because I think I want to hear Clifton Altaf's kind of view on this. So we ultimately are still using the majority of the products that we are currently using on our machines today are reminiscent of a mid-90s to late 90s user experience, right? Dense menus of tiny icons, tiny buttons, trying to kind of find what you need to do. And for a new user, getting to grips with that tool, that's not easy. And that's, to some extent, probably most of our audience here are here because it's our jobs to try and explain these kind of really complex products to people. And I genuinely think we are on that moment where all of these startups are just ignoring all of that history of we should make software look like this. You know, I'm definitely seeing software coming to market right now with clean user interfaces based on plain language interaction. You know, rather than trying to remember the keyboard, you know, prompt menu for that tool, just simply typing in, I need to do this and getting exactly what I want as a result. And I definitely think, you know, a lot of the users out there that have been using products to deliver designs and construction, I think they're going to find it weird when they're presented with user interfaces that don't have 700 buttons. I think they're going to have a moment to adjust, but we have to go down this path because right now on everybody's desktop, Adobe, Microsoft Teams, Outlook just pushed a cloud update and moved a button somewhere, and everyone's going to have to, you know, grow a tolerance to these things changing constantly. And over to Altaf and Clifton, really, because, you know, this is all about modern user experience and modern interface, not based on what we've had for the last 20 years.
Our thesis generally has been that you have to meet the user where they are. You cannot ask people to come to technology, and in user experience design, muscle memory is a very important thing. It's not just about minimizing the number of clicks with a clean user experience or a UI. It would be to how do you leverage their existing muscle memory, which they have built over, in our case, decades and decades. And what the modern user experience guidelines enable is contextual information. If you know and predict where the user is, how do you enable next? How do you show them the next set of information? How do they go deeper in it in a prompt-based environment? The prompt is still mouse clicks, but could be something else. And today, just to tell you from all the customers that we work with, the most requested feature for us has been, can I have a command line where I can just find things? And I think that's very obvious from the behavior which people have been used to. But user experience, I think, will come from all the decades of training which people have come, and we have to meet them there, rather than asking them to learn a whole new tool over months and months.
Hard question. I think, I think the greatest success that TestFit has had is our user experience, is our interface, is grabbing a node and seeing things update in real time. And there's a whole lot of hell that goes into making that user experience possible. I know why people want a command line, like, hey, I want this tool to get out of my way because I'm faster than this tool. That's why you have a command line. And it's a concept that like UX people just don't understand because maybe they have never mastered a tool so well that they want a command line. Or maybe they delight in clicking the button every flipping time to see, the color change or whatever. But what you have to do is get out of the user's way. And so I think TestFit has committed a lot of sins in that regard, getting that first solve on the page or on the screen really fast. But editing parameters that you don't know the name of and trying to find those parameters, and it's really difficult to train. And we have just dictionaries of stuff on like our knowledge base on how to use TestFit parameters. And so that's been the hell of the last 3 years. Okay, so now we're in 2024. TestFit now has 606 parameters. That means that we can generate the known universe, but we can't tell our users which levers to press in the right order to get what they want. So that's leading us to what is like the next iteration of TestFit. Like we're probably going to throw out like most of our UX and start over in a way. And I think you have to be comfortable with that. Like, okay, we push the industry this hard and sort of with this tool in this way for 8 years or 7 years. We've trained a lot of people and we want to stop training because it's so annoying. Like the tool is getting in the way. So now we need to fix the tool, right? And it's hard for me to accept that because I designed the damn thing, So yeah, like we're not done yet. Like we have 15 more UX iterations to go before, we've found that interface that is the next generation interface. It might have ribbons, it might have, properties panel. It might not have anything at all. And I think the thing to take from OpenAI and what they've done with ChatGPT is that an interface can literally be a text box. So
I think Google did that first.
sorry.
Clifton,
Yes.
I
Yeah,
appreciate
sorry.
I appreciate your directness and transparency there. That it's awesome.
If I can add just one more point, because I've been spending a lot of time on this topic. Going through the recent success of tools like Notion, Airtable, Figma, a lot of people who have spoken to found it hard as a first time user to get started with these. Like Notion is literally, you can do anything with it. But why do people still adapt it? Why do they go through that hurdle? And how did it happen for the first time when Notion got launched? And what I realized is the value they provided on the table for those first few early adopters was so humongous. They were able to swallow through or go through this like initial hump. And when these people who loved the value so much after going through that initial hump shouted from the deepest conviction that this tool really does what it promises to do, everybody was able to put in that extra effort in evaluating that tool, not as a very cursory glance, oh, there's something cool, I need to check it out. But when I hear from a friend, they've become better, more productive because they're using Notion or Airtable, I'll probably give it that 5 minute extra or a 10 minute extra time and do those two things where I'll see the value. And that value will make me learn even more and keep going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And I think it's a very intricate psychological study that you need to understand how people adapt new technology or new tools and how those become successful.
Yeah,
It's a built-in reward system, right?
Let's
That
jump
you're
in on
talking
this.
about.
we got Evan going. Sorry.
I was just saying that it's a built-in
Go for
reward
it,
system.
Evan.
I don't know what's going on here. I'm hearing an
Well,
echo.
on that too, I just want to say, like, mixed reality, I think we sidestep one really big thing, right? To your point, like, we're visual people first. And I remember experiencing Iris VR for the first time. You put on the VR headset, and now we're teleconferencing people in from all over the world, just like this call. But instead of being on a flat screen with talking heads, we're like people in a space talking about design. And I think that, like, remembering that we're craftsmen and women first and visually oriented first, and then the data supports that. And then how do you gamify it, to your point, Evan? How do you give some reward of making progress so you can kind of incentivize people to go deeper? I think that's, if we can make a order of magnitude leap. I wanted to say metaverse, but that's already a proprietary tool. It's like having that environment where we can come together and get the right people in the room, the right minds talking dynamically, where you use everything that's not just your words to communicate. Like, what about nonverbal communication, which a lot of people shake their heads and stuff, or drawing, right? Something can be said visually better than with words. So I think then there's all the data that supports it. So in my mind, it's like that first moment of calling in 10 people from all over the world as a little avatar, and then you could actually hear their voice and point and draw, and then move that into the BIM model. I mean, that was mind-boggling. That was back in 2015 when I first tried it. So, I mean, I don't know. That's just my 2 cents on it.
Evan,
We need
did you
more of
have
that.
more?
There are actually some good points happening in the chat, and I want to jump in. So going in the user experience, I think thinking about the universal design aspect of it too is really important, because and accessibility, and how it needs to have multiple ways because different people access the information differently, right? So, someone made a comment like, well, if you're deaf, then you can't use the auditory sort of features. And if you need to be able to have the keyboard to type with just because that's easier for you, like, thinking about all of these things goes back to diversity and inclusion issues, and thinking about ways of making it easier for everybody, that there's multiple ways to get to the same place, that you can have 5 different ways to access something within a software, but trying not to make it too complicated at the same time, right? That's the difficult piece of it. But one thing I do want to note, is that I think that in a way it is shifting to people being more agile and more open to changing things. I mean, I watch my children. I have, 8-year-olds and a 14-year-old, and I watch them on their devices, and whatever they get, they like figure it out in 2 minutes, like how to do it. It's totally different than something else. And it's totally fine for them that they can jump back and forth between different interfaces without any issue. And when I used to teach Revit, I could see, the people that had that more flexible thinking in their brain switching from one software to another. And there's not, I mean, in the interface between AutoCAD and Revit, there's not that much difference, but it's a different way of thinking. And I could see how it was easier for some people to do that paradigm shift, right, than for other people. But I think that it's getting easier and easier for people with all of our technology to shift their paradigms easier. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. What you're pointing to is something that I'm surprised hadn't come up earlier, and maybe I'm probably the oldest guy here, maybe you and me, Shaan, is that there is a huge generational shift going on right now in this industry, maybe more so than a lot of other industries where family-owned, multi-generational businesses exist in AEC. And myself and Shaan, who were power users 30 years ago, the command line was amazing when buttons suddenly showed up in AutoCAD, for Windows 12 in 1999. Wow, we could multitasking, 2 applications running at once. Whereas, now your kids in 5 to 8 years are going to be the entry level, maybe AEC professionals, and they will have had decades of digital technologies in their hands. So the need of a user interface to both be powerful for those who are power users and are used to methods decades old, and yet those who are just coming in who don't expect to have to learn software is a big challenge. I have huge respect for UX professionals who are able to take a text-based or maybe a diagram of a software workflow and turn it into brilliant software. Kudos to them.
All right, we're getting to the end here. I'd like to see if there's anything that anybody wants to talk about to wrap up, and it has to be a lightning round though, or a final thoughts. And then I'd like to tackle, it's Daniel Lynch. Like, he's got some questions and he's got some great feedback. I'd like to leave some time for, just a couple things with him, and then we can wrap it up and let the Augie team go on with their program. They're going to have a break and then a final closure meeting. So,
hey, Shaan, just keep it going, Shaan. We can minimize the break. So
don't say that to us.
Take it to the top of the hour, and then we can do the closing.
No, I got to be mindful. I've got a couple people here on global time zones that it's and also schedules. I'm mindful of that. So we can go just a little bit, but if anybody needs to back out, please feel free to raise your hand and go. I appreciate everything that we've gotten. My brain is overwhelmed with the amount of thoughts, and was there going to be any cohesive one, symbiotic, culmination solution? Probably not. But I think that we had some great input on differing things and different perspectives, and from big and small, user to vendor, it's challenging all around, and I appreciate that.
I'll also say one last thing. I do need to drop off. I think it's an amazing time for this industry. There've been times where it just felt like a few of us were pushing a really big rock uphill, and that thing was just going to fall back down on us. And things that we were loved, and it was just us. And now it just feels like, I'll paraphrase my friend Ian Howe said, it feels like there's a few people at the top of the hill pulling that rock up with us. There's a lot of interest in these capabilities that we are so passionate about, and it makes the job easier, makes it more fun. I think that we can all get on calls like this and talk about, where we intersect, and it's not just the basics. These are some big things that we're accomplishing now. So with that, I'm gonna head out. But this has been a thrill, Shaan, to be part of this conversation. Thanks for pulling us together.
Thank you, Mark. I couldn't say it that well. I was around with some of the big changes in CAD, and it was really exciting, but we couldn't say much to everybody because there was not this collaborative, discussion, environment back then. It has changed now, and there's some bigger challenges these days that we all got to come together and solve. And I think that everybody's kind of realized that. So thanks, Mark. I do appreciate that. And I'm an old dinosaur, but I love the possibilities of where things are going, and the Cliftons, the Altus. I'm blown away. I would say to everybody who's attending this and who watches the recording, the people who are on this panel, follow them, read what they write, listen to what they say, get onto Evan's podcast, read some of Aaron's documents. It blows my mind, what Matt's team is doing. And I'm interested to see what Matt's team is doing with Forma and how they come out all through that. And wrapping in, going back to, Tim, you were talking about, the XR spaces. Well, that team is, in the universe of Matt's world. And, you've got the Wild, which were good friends of mine that got acquired into Autodesk, and Iris is in there. And now you've got Workshop XR. So they're, it's a smaller world than we think, but bigger challenges. All right. Anybody have any closing statements?
I'll just throw out there that there's people on this panel, there's people in this community, there's people watching this right now. And I just want to put out a big thank you, because you care so much about this industry. I see the passion for why we do what we do, which is rarely the tools, right? It's rarely the technology. It's a much bigger picture than that. And the people who are invested in contributing and participating in this community are making a huge difference on behalf of so many others who are stubborn and difficult to work with. And we love them anyways, because we care more and more about the big picture and why than the how and the what. And there's people working so hard on behalf for a global better, that I just want to put that out there. Thank you to everybody who's really doing the hard work. I mean, it's unglorified, difficult work. And, I think technology will continue to play a big, unthanked role in the evolution of AEC and the built environment. But it's so necessary. And so thank you so much for the unsung heroes who are here contributing and being a part of this. I really, truly appreciate everyone so much.
I can't wait to see Clifton in 30 years when he's got everything solved. He's going to be balder than me, more gray hairs, probably more angry.
If I'm not a licensed architect making churches by then, I've done this wrong. Okay.
Hardcore capitalism.
In Clifton, Daniel Lynch kept saying your product reminds him of site ops that blew his mind. So, Daniel, I don't know how to address.
Site ops reminds me of test bed.
There we go. I love that. I appreciate everything. And, I think we have, like I said, the goal was to get some people that were really passionate and interesting and had differing perspectives and get them together. Sometimes that's an interesting little experiment, like, not following a recipe and throwing it in a bowl. Sometimes you get a winner. I mean, that's how you get some of the original recipes that taste good. You didn't know. But I appreciate this. I mean, I'm overwhelmed. Evan, as always, you distill things down so nice and eloquent. I appreciate that, and love listening to the podcast and the people you bring on there. I mean, I met Timothy through you. Let's keep solving these challenges. Maybe it doesn't take 30 years, Clifton. We don't know. Maybe it takes 60.
What Aaron's right about is, like, we won't be building new buildings in 30 years, right? Like, that's totally true, and that's the crazy thing to me, is like, we're in the final innings of ground up buildings as a culture. So if I'll end on that.
Yeah. And Clifton, I mean, I want to give you some kudos here. I mean, everybody on this panel and what you guys do in your spheres is amazing. But Clifton, far too many times you have these little graphics, and it's so easy to see, like, oh, I'm moving a buildings, and the parking lots and spaces, but it was really nice to hear how you say you're in an utter hell at times, and it's tough to do. And I think a lot of times people that use software don't understand the complexity and the stress and how many, how much that takes on the other side to produce those kind of, the algorithms or the machine learning or the workflows. So thanks for always putting out those and making it look so simple. Makes it challenging for everybody else. Anybody else?
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that, Shaan.
Daniel, you got a
throw in there,
question?
people keep.
Go ahead.
Can I just throw that other? My little statement is, people for like the longest time have been asking, "Where's the easy button?" And how can we clone you or whatever? And I'm like, okay, no, not ego, but how many technologists, right? You want more technology savvy people in your firm. And I just want to say, if nothing else, video is the new PowerPoint. And so the more we can be better storytellers through how we're talking about this with a value-based approach, I don't know, I'm committed to bringing high quality videos as hopefully a cursor to interactive real-time user experiences through the tools we're building. And I don't know, I just think like really excited just so for everyone here and everyone in the call, like get comfortable using video because it's the future as well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Well, I think we're coming to the end. I don't see a question I can distill down, but there's a lot to think about, a lot of challenges, and hopefully it doesn't take 30 years. So, Matt, you got anything to add? Alta, Hervey?
No, I think,
Great work.
the only thing I'll add just as kind of a closing thought here is, I agree with a lot of things are said. It's an exciting time for the industry, especially what Mark said. And it feels like there are people pulling at the top and we're actually all pushing the ball up the hill together at the same time. It's coming from both ends of the community, which is really fantastic to see. And I'm really optimistic. And I think we're all making really great progress and we're doing it collaboratively, which I think is the most important thing. It's not being led from one particular side.
No, thank you. Aaron?
Just to summarize, sorry, I'll just quickly go. Just to summarize my thoughts, I think interoperability and eliminating data silos are the most critical problems to solve in the short term. And I'm very confident that I think we are moving towards solving it, and I think we'll see the solution. And what that will unlock is adoption of technology, or the barrier to adopt technology will reduce because people can use whatever tool they love without disrupting their core data because data silos won't get created. And I think that can lead to a much brighter future where we can do whatever we want using whatever technology which will come today. It's AI ML, tomorrow there will be something else, and we'll have a much brighter future. Might not take 30 years, might take much, much earlier to see impact of it.
Thank you, Alta, for really appreciate it. I love what Snaptrade's doing. I think it's all those kind of innovative kind of kicking around, showing new ways to do things is amazing and finding the space. So thanks. Aaron, it's late for you, buddy.
I've just about finished the cup of tea in front of me, so yeah, I'm getting there. I mean, I think my closing comment would be, if you've enjoyed the conversation, if you are inspired by all of the topics on the slide that Shaan has shared, I know we're not allowed to do sales pitches, but I'm not selling anything. I'm simply positioning this idea that you are all capable and able to implement and influence the software vendors and the startups that are in this space right now. So Google future AEC software specification. You'll see a website that is dedicated to data, access, locations, context, scale, user experience, modeling capabilities, responsible designs, modern methods of construction, automation, intelligence, deliverables, licensing, help contribute to what you want from future AEC software. So people like Altaf, Clifton, and everybody else can see what we, the users, want from the future tools that we're going to be using. You can check that site out. You can add any comments to the existing data that's already there. It is literally a kind of a shopping list, a wish list of what we want from the future. So yeah, please do contribute to that. It is wide open for architects, structural engineers, everybody get involved. Let's help them help us.
I hear you. Yeah, that's obs. And along with that, I would say all of the software vendors have active ways of listening to their users and getting involved with them. So their beta programs, I I started a lot of them at Autodesk, so beta.autodesk.com. Revit has a great program of listening, and they have a whole bunch of other things going on. So influence them that way, as well as Aaron's method of, the checklist of things that are needed in the industry. So I would say, if you're using software and you're not giving feedback to somebody or telling somebody what you need, don't complain when it doesn't get done. Get involved, be passionate about it, and support those that are listening to you and doing it. So, kudos to everybody who came in here that does software. It's not easy. So, and thanks, Matt, thanks Timothy, Evan, Aldif, Hervey. What time is it there? I feel really bad.
No worries. It's like almost 3. It's cool though.
Oh my goodness. Well, I sure appreciate it. And
I only do it because, as we said, I'm very passionate about this.
Yeah.
So, it's Friday, whatever. I'll sleep in tomorrow.
I will owe your daughter ice cream. A couple of years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
She gave me a Lego architecture demonstration, and I gave her money for ice cream. So
Yeah. No, but this was a fantastic session. I was very honored to be in this group, and I'm very excited for how things continue moving forward. In 5 years, I know things are going to be very different, because 5 years ago they were very, now is very different from 5 years ago. So
I used to be in the business of predicting, strategic foresight kind of stuff, predicting 5 to 10 years out and what people would need. And I don't think that's possible right now.
no,
So
I've talked to high schoolers at my daughter's school. I presented at like Career Week, and I told all the kids there, I said, when I was your age, the job I have now did not exist. So just think about that as you move forward, that technology is moving so quickly right now that what you could be doing when you're my age probably doesn't exist right now, if this is what you're interested in. So, you're gonna make it.
I think we all
I got
have
to make my last job. I got to make this job, and I'm going to be starting a new role soon, and I get to make that job. So I'm very excited about how open the industry is now for people making their own way for what's best, for what's needed.
I've got a son who's an Autodesk customer of Civil 3D, among other vendors, and I actually had fun, and I actually flew a drone at an elementary school where I grew up. And I was telling my son, I go, the wildest thing about that is, if I could talk to fourth grade, Shaan, and say, someday you're going to come back here and you're going to fly a robot with a camera through the lunchroom, I probably would have been committed somewhere. Like, I wouldn't have believed that one bit, but here it happened, and it was kind of fun. So I think that's, to what you're saying, that, what your job didn't exist, when you were younger. And I think it's going to even be more compressed. So
For sure.
many, many, many podcast options in there, Evan.
Yes, there are.
Yeah. So thank you, everybody. I'm trying to wrap it up. Thanks again. I really appreciate it. And thanks for everybody who attended, and thanks to Augie. So it's awesome. We'll see you.